Thanks for tuning in to the Arledge Football Network on Proline TV. I'm your host, Greg DePalma, and we're talking Cleveland Browns. That's right, the Cleveland Browns, one of the stories of the NFL draft. Even though we're going to get to that story when we go over all of our picks, all the picks that the Browns chose, as far as breaking them down by detail. With our special guest, Fred Greetham from the Orange and Brown Report. Fred, it's great to have you back. Thanks for doing this again.
Always a pleasure, Greg, to talk some football with you, even if it's in May.
Yeah. I guess what else are we going to talk about, right? There are a lot of things, but hey, that's why we love football, because there's even football to talk about in May. So let's go ahead and get right to it. Even though things might start to calm down a little bit, free agency's over, draft is over. There's still a little bit of free agency to be done. But I wanted to go over the draft picks with you, and also, of course, maybe even ask you if you've had any insight to any of the undrafted kids, maybe any of those kids that you think might be able to make the team, get your overall, maybe I get a grade from you as far as this draft class. And obviously we'll go over the Shedeur Sanders stuff as well. So let's first start off, Fred, with how things shook up with the first pick. Was it a surprise? Was this something you had heard, or did this kind of catch you off guard when the trade came down and the Browns were able to acquire a second-round pick in this year's draft, a first-round pick for next year, primarily? Those were the goods, in order to just move down a few spots and then not take Travis Hunter. I know a lot of fans are probably getting their hopes up on that. But were you kind of taken off guard by that, or is that something you had heard?
Well, about the last couple of days of the draft, before the draft, are starting to get rumblings that they were listening to offers, and turns out they pretty much had a deal in place a couple weeks before the draft took place with Jacksonville, that if indeed Cam Ward was not available at 1, they would trade down with him to 5, for that. But if Cam Ward was available, if for some reason Tennessee was bluffing and he was still there, the deal was off.
Okay.
And we all know that Ward went to Tennessee, and so the Browns, pulled the trigger. I think I think Andrew Berry kind of did a masterful job. He met with us before the draft, and he really went out of his way in praising Travis Hunter. He compared him to Shohei Ohtani, that he called him a unicorn. How many guys, could pitch and hit and do that? And so it seemed pretty logical to me when you're picking 2, and if Cam Ward is taken number 1, there's nothing in their way to take Travis Hunter. I felt either he was trying to entice the Titans to take him at 1 so they could take Cam Ward, or he knew that Cam Ward was going to the Titans, and he was just saying there's not a lot of risk in talking about it other than to talk up to make a trade, because of course Ohtani got $700 million, but in the NFL all you have to do is call his name. He's on your team for 5 years at a very reasonable. And I really thought it solved 2 problems. Andrew Berry had drafted a wide receiver every year in his first 5 years, so that checked the box. And he had drafted a cornerback in 4 of the last 5 years. And they had needs at both. That would check 2 boxes at 2 premium positions. So why would you not take the guy? So then, when I look back, it seems like a very practical thing to do, but it took a lot of the sizzle out of it. I mean, no disrespect to Mason Graham. I mean, our lads, a lot had him like 4th best player in the draft, but you kind of got a wrestler instead of a unicorn, and you think you're getting a once in a generational guy.
Yep.
I likened it a little bit to the pick of Joe Thomas in 2007 with the 3rd pick. Not very sexy, but 10 straight Pro Bowls.
Yep.
Went to the ballot of the Hall of Fame on his first. So I think it's a solid pick if he's everything that he's cracked up to be. We saw him at the mini camp. You know, they don't do any contact, and he's not the most impressive looking guy, you know, but he's a defensive tackle.
Yeah.
He lost his lunch in Saturday's practice, so that wasn't great.
Okay.
But, you know, all things being said, to move down 3 spots to get Mason Graham, to get a second-round pick, which they used to get Quinshon Judkins, and to get a 4th-round pick, which they used to get Dylan Sampson. So basically the trade is Hunter and whoever else Jacksonville got in the 5th round for Graham, Judkins, and Sampson, who they're planning on being their 1-2 running backs this year, and 1st-round pick next year.
Yep.
I mean, the 1st-round pick next year is obviously important because the quarterback position, when they made the pick, it seemed pretty obvious they weren't infatuated enough with any other quarterback to take them with the number 2 pick because they had a desperate need at quarterback. They did take 2 later, but it sent a signal, I think, that we're going all in next year to get a quarterback. Maybe not now. You drafted 2, kind of give them a look and a shot and make a decision. If they, but Jacksonville, you know, what if Jacksonville's in the top 5
and they could
sitting
be
there with your own pick, and you might have a chance to get the best quarterback in the draft next year. So I can't fault them. You know, they do have a lot of needs. So I think they solved, if these guys are what they're expected to be in their projections, you solved 2 real big needs. I think you put your running game right back on the map, and, you know, tackle rush. The defense against the rush has been a problem the last couple years, and an inside pass rush. So I think it's practical. I mean, if Travis Hunter is everything that he's made out to be, you're gonna wish you had him. But I think if you got 3 really solid players, and it really will play out, it's not finished, who you get next year in the 1st round. You know, if you get a franchise quarterback or a game-changing guy or 2 of them, you know, that will help. I think they're playing the long game. They realize, you know, Travis Hunter might not put us in the Super Bowl this year, so why not address some other needs?
Yeah, when I first heard of the trade, a couple of things went through my head. Initially, it was, I think it's a smart move. Again, you went through the whole reasons why. On the other side, you know, taking the negative side or just the opposite side, it was like, you know, Cleveland's done, and we've talked about this the last few years. They've done a good job in personnel. This is a deep roster, this talented roster. They need a quarterback. We all know that they have one. They should be a playoff team, and it could be a Super Bowl contender. But what this team needs more than anything are difference-making players. They have they have a lot of talent, but they only have like one difference-making player, and they could have really used another one. And now I guess the question is going to be, again, like you said with Mason Graham, how do we know? Maybe he is. Maybe he's going to be that good that it will compensate. But these are the questions. That's why they earn the hard they earn the hard cash in order to make the big decisions. But do you think a lot of the fans, I know they're probably, was it like 50-50 as far as how the fans took it?
Yeah, I don't think, you know, they had a big pre-draft party down at the stadium. They had Journey, actually, and a lot of us were making a joke saying, I don't know if they're, you know, going to be playing Don't Stop Believe or Don't Stop Believing, you know. So we thought they're certainly not going to trade down. I mean, you're going to take Travis Hunter to Journey with Don't Stop Believing. I wasn't there. I didn't hear really more, but I do think most people kind of took it as the practical side of it. But I think there was disappointment because of what I said.
Yeah.
There wasn't that spectacular sizzle. I mean, and you could see, you know, a lot of people right up to the end still wanted Shedeur Sanders with the 2 pick. I mean, you know, or taking a quarterback, and, you know, and they passed on quarterbacks like 5 times before they took one.
Yeah.
And so everybody knows you need, a franchise quarterback. So I just think, again, the way I look at it, it was a practical draft, but it didn't really have that sizzle. Looking back, Greg, it was really a strange draft. They went out of character. They never use high draft picks on running backs.
That's right.
They never really use high draft picks on linebackers. And they used the first pick in the second round on a linebacker when they had all them quarterbacks available and, and wide receivers and playmakers. And so from that aspect, they went out of character. And when everybody expected you need a wide receiver, they didn't take one.
No.
And they've needed wide receiver. That was one of the big needs, was a wide receiver. And they really, after the draft, they signed Deontay Johnson. But, that could be a problem waiting to happen. Yeah. I mean, who knows what happened to him last year when he was 3 different teams. Obviously, he has talent, and this is kind of like his last chance maybe. But, so it's really, they kind of went totally. He's drafted an offensive lineman every year. He didn't draft an offensive lineman. So it was just really off script. I mean, from the first 5 years, Andrew Berry, 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, and a linebacker and a defensive tackle. So
all good players though.
Yeah. I mean, it's really is going to have to bear out. I mean, they still went, we're going into after the draft without a starting safety. I mean, they let Juan Thornhill go. Rodney McLeod retired, and they didn't sign any until I see today. I think they signed a couple veteran safeties. I don't know if they've been announced, but Devontae KZ or something, and Rayshawn Jenkins. I know Jenkins had tried out. I didn't see that announced, but it was announced on the internet by a reporters or 2. So yeah, I mean, they still have some needs, and some depth, but I like the tight end they got in the 3rd round, and so they addressed some areas of need, but it was strange. There's no question they're rejuvenating their running game, and really the bittersweet part, it kind of means probably the end of Nick Chubb by going out and getting 2 top end backs. I mean, I wanted them to get either one of the Buckeye backs, either Judkins or Henderson, and they got Judkins. And they just said Sampson was just too good to pass up, and it was there in the 4th round. You look at him, SEC Offensive Player of the Year. So you can really see a 1-2 punch there at running back. Their running game tailed off. They're going back to the wide zone scheme, brought in a coach who was a disciple of Bill Callahan, and they're going back to that style of play. So you can see Judkins, Sampson, probably Judkins being the bell cow. And so I expect them to really commit back to the running game. And that's the style of play Kevin Stefanski plays best with Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, or if one of these rookies emerge.
Okay, let's go through it. So what does the addition of Graham, what does that do as far as the pecking order and the dominoes that fall behind him? Obviously, it straightens the depth and a big need.
Well, they cut Dalvin Tomlinson. That was mostly a money-making or cost-cutting deal, but they did immediately sign Malik Collins, who actually had more production with the 49ers to go with Michael Hall, who's their 2nd-round pick last year at defensive tackle. Had a little suspension problem to start the year, but showed some good pass rush in that. Then he got hurt at the end of the year, had a surgery. But I expect Graham and Hall to be kind of the 2 interior guys, with Collins and Shelby Harris as kind of their, the guys in the rotation.
Okay.
Jim Schwartz wants a interior pass rush, and that's what Malik Collins and Mason Graham are expected to bring, along with Hall and Harris. And so I think that rotation's pretty much set.
Okay.
in that department on the interior. I think they're expecting that to help Myles Garrett a lot, having a guy next to him that can rush the passer and take some of the pressure off of him.
Yeah, because that was their only pick up front on the defensive line. Of course, they made several free agent moves. Tryon Schwesinger was, I guess, the biggest one. They also added a free agent. And I don't know what you found out about some of these kids. I mean, Huntington seemed to have a good pro day. He was getting some buzz as maybe a late round addition. So we'll find out whether or not he has a chance to make the team. But overall, just even looking at the depth here on the RLES depth chart, on the defensive line in general, there's a lot more depth than I've seen it in recent years.
Yeah, they really liked Alex Wright coming on, and then he got hurt last year, so he missed the last half of the season. A lot of people thought Okoronkwo might not make it through the offseason because he's $7-8 million, maybe a cost cutting, but so far he's still on the roster. They really like Isaiah McGuire, and they think he can really, he's shown the most of the young guys. I could have made a case for a while. I really liked Abdul Carter and really liked the idea, if you're not going to take a quarterback, to take him.
Yeah.
But they opted, obviously, to trade down and go with Graham. But, yeah, I think it's going to be committee. I don't know. Tryon Schwesinger kind of fits the mold of Andrew Berry. Always seems to come back with a first-round pick that they really like that maybe didn't make it somewhere else. And he had a high grade on him, and he became available now after 4 years with Tampa. So, I think that he's going to be in the rotation. But, yeah, I think McGuire's the guy that they're counting on along with Alex Wright.
Yep.
So that's where it stands. I thought Zadarius Smith would make sense. He was like the best available free agent out there. But they let him go last year or traded him to the Lions. He's 32, but he still ended up as the second leading sack guy with the Browns. I think he had 5.5, even though he only played up until the trade deadline. The last I looked, he hadn't signed with anybody. No. So I think they had a deal with him last year. Hey, if we're out of contention, we'll trade you to it. So I would think if he can't get a better offer, I don't know why they wouldn't do the same thing, but maybe they just, don't want to go that route with him. So that, I think the defensive line's kind of where it is right now.
Okay.
And again, they didn't address it in the draft, really.
Yeah.
Like you said, Huntington's really the undrafted free agent that I've heard some good things about.
Okay. Yeah, because they are going to need Wright or McGuire to take that next step because there is no depth outside of Garrett on the edge. But they also compensate by having a little bit more on the interior. And of course, nowadays in the NFL, that's just as important, is getting that inside push inside the quarterback's face. And that's something that we're hearing a lot more of over the last few years.
I will say this about Huntington. They actually listed him as a defensive tackle.
Yes.
Even though I think he was an edge at Tulane.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he played a 3-4 at Tulane. I'd have to check. But yeah, he's obviously got, defense. He has 4'3" defensive end size. So yeah, he doesn't, at 6'5", 280, that's not really what you see too often on the inside, unless you're already a 4-3 team. So yeah, all right. But again, he had a pretty good pro day, so we'll find out whether or not he can have a good summer and maybe stick on. How if there's like an average number of free agents, college UDFAs that the Browns tend to keep? Do they tend to keep one or two, or it's really hard for them to ever keep one of those guys?
Now, this rookie minicamp was really strange. They had 56 players there, but 26 were on tryout basis. Now, I've seen 3 or 4 so far have been signed, but they had 13 undrafted free agent rookies they signed, and the 7 draft picks, and they had like 10 first-year players that were on the practice squad last year, something like that. But the last, they've seemed to get 1 or 2, make the team or end up on the practice squad more than that. They bring them back. They bring back a lot of them after the cuts that don't get signed by other teams. But I know Ronnie Hickman was undrafted. DeAnthony Bell was undrafted. Javion Cohen was undrafted. So they have every year, it seems like one or two guys stick. Mohamed Mahmoud, whatever, Diabete, the linebacker, was undrafted. If I looked at the list, I'd probably remember if there's any others. But yeah, for the Hickman right now would probably be the starting safety to replace Thornhill. And this is his third year. He was undrafted. So it seems like 1 to 2 make the roster. And then they usually, it seems like most of the guys cut come back were undrafted players or guys like that don't get claimed by other teams. So
I remember, Hickman. That was a surprise that he wasn't drafted. So that was a really good one to be able to get him after the draft. And now all of a sudden, looks like he might be a starter for the Browns. So you can get these guys after the draft. It happens every year, happens a lot. And that's where all the scouting comes in. So, but some teams are better than others at doing it. Okay. Sticking on defense. So Schwesinger, who was actually one of, I know John Cooper, our lead scout at Our Lads, over at ourlads.com, loves Schwesinger. Talked a lot about him during the draft process. Liked him an awful lot. Came close a couple times to grading him as a late first round guy. That's how much he loved him. So the Browns were able to pick him up. And obviously we talked about the need for them to add another linebacker with the possibility of Joke not even playing in 2025.
Yes. They had to like him a lot. For what I said is that they don't put a lot of value in linebackers. In fact, Jim Schwartz, for the most part, placed 2 linebackers. He had JOK playing sideline to sideline, pretty much all 3 downs. And Jordan Hicks was the middle back that, the veteran signal caller. They played a lot of like 5 defensive backs a lot of times. And so they said it wasn't so much about JOK status because they actually, I think all things being equal, Hicks is 32. He's in the last year of his contract. He's the green dot. I think the big picture, Schwesinger will be that green dot, and JOK returns. He would be the other linebacker. We don't know his status. He has been in the building, which is a good sign, but who knows what he's doing. They've been very tight-lipped about it. But Schwesinger, they like him a lot. Obviously, the first pick in the second round is usually, in fact, the previous 3 years, it's been traded by teams because they find a guy they really want and trade up to get him. That's where the quarterbacks and stuff like that were available. Browns kept that pick, didn't take a quarterback, and they took him. Now, obviously, in this rookie mini camp, you can't see a lot. But he picked one off in 7-on-7 and returned it for a touchdown and really looked the part of the old school middle linebacker, rolled up his shorts and it kind of reminded me of Clay Matthews when he used to play for the Browns, and and if they've got something there, I think that he's a guy that can start right out of the gate.
Yep.
And probably could do, I don't think he's as fleet of foot as JOK, but he's supposed to be very good in coverage. So they need that to cover the tight ends and so forth. So I think that he's going to be right in the lineup pretty much whether JOK's on the field or not, along with Hicks and, a couple of the other guys that they have there. So
yeah, that's going to be
like him.
That's going to be a really nice looking pair of linebackers once JOK is healthy. No question. And even just taking a look again at, there are some holes still that maybe, or some questionable holes that might be there that we could just see on the depth chart. But one thing that they did shore up is that middle with their first 2 picks with Graham and Schwesinger. Yeah. Meanwhile, Mascarenas Arnold is a kid that I felt would be one to watch as an undrafted free agent. probably wasn't going to get drafted, but when I went over a big list of players that I thought would be interesting, he was someone that I kind of listed in that group. So we'll see whether or not he has a chance to make the team. So that is linebacker with their second pick, their first second-round pick. Then, as you mentioned, Fred, with the pick for the Hunter trade, which is pick 36, they get this additional second-round pick. They go after an Ohio State Buckeye, a local kid, Quinshon Judkins, even though he only played for the Buckeyes 1 year, but still it was a championship year. And as you said, this is a little bit offbeat with Berry not usually drafting or never drafting a running back before the 5th round. Not only did he do it once, he did it twice, but he did it as early as round number 2. So this just shows you, like you said all along, when we talked to you prior to the draft, and you just mentioned it before with the scheme switch back to what really makes this offense run under their head coach. And it looks like maybe even why they neglected that wide receiver depth, and we'll get to Fannin in just a little bit. But maybe that also is a signal that, we'd like to have some more talent out there, but hey man, we're going to run the football. And that is more important right now than number 2 or number 3 receiver.
Yeah, I mean, that was the staple. Obviously, early in 23, Nick Chubb went down with that horrible injury, and they dropped, from a top 5 rushing offense to, like 12th, but still they finished 12th. But last year, they dropped to 29th. It was the first time they've been under 100 yards a game rushing, in the 5 years with Stefanski. And a lot of it was they went to a pass-first offense, trying to build it around Deshaun Watson, and it was a disaster. They ended 32nd in the NFL in points per game, 15.2, and they realized we need to get back to our roots, running the ball. They have offensive line's got a little age on it, but they were all brought in to run that wide zone, blocking scheme under Bill Callahan. They ran it 4 years very successfully, and then last year they were all kind of switched up on. So they brought in Mike Bloomgren, who was the Rice head coach, who was under Bill Callahan, and all indications they're going back to the wide zone and to the running game. And when you have Judkins and Sampson and Jerome Ford, even if they brought back Chubb, you can make a big commitment. Even if you have an injury, you got some depth there now. But that's a clear signal with Judkins and Sampson that the future is those two guys. And, and I just think that that's good. That helps your offensive line. It helps your quarterback, whether it's a rookie or whether it's even in the play action pass. So that's really no secret what they're doing. Shorten the game, rely on getting the defense, trying to get the defense back to where they were a couple years ago when they were number 1. I mean, the last couple years, last year they had 37 turnovers, 23 interceptions, and like 14 fumbles. You can't win games turning the ball over like that. And if you can just hang on the ball, control the clock, that can go a long way. So I think that's the blueprint that they want to follow this year.
And of course, as you mentioned, they also added Sampson in round 4. So Judkins and Sampson, when it's all said and done, just making like a prediction, and I'm sure fantasy fans might be attentive to this. But if you had to guess, do you think Sampson and Judkins? Well, we know Judkins is going to wind up being the number 1 back, but who do you think is going to end up with more touches, Sampson or Ford?
Yeah, I think that maybe early Ford will, but he's in the last year of his contract, his rookie contract. You mentioned that they haven't put a lot of, value in draft, and they got him in the 5th round. And the only other running back they had drafted was 6th round. And so this was a very, very deep running back class. So I thought they would get maybe one of the big ones, maybe in the 3rd round. They decided not to wait and take Judkins in the 2nd round. That tells you how much they liked him when all the other things were. But I thought they would still get a pretty good name guy in the 5th, 6th round for the future, even an undrafted guy.
Yeah.
But as they said, they had Sampson rated way higher and he was there in the 4th round, so they took him. So I think with that value, especially with Ford in the last year of his contract, by the end of the year, I think they will have Sampson ahead of him, if not earlier on. I think when you look at what Ohio State did, Travion Henderson and Judkins, I think it kept them both fresh.
Yep.
I'm not saying the Browns are going to do that, but I wanted Henderson more so than Judkins because he was more of the lightning
home run threat. Yep.
His speed. But I looked on our lads, the speed that Sampson had the same speed, in fact, a little faster than Henderson. So I see him and Judkins being able to duplicate that.
Yes.
I know Ford's kind of got the same thing, but one of the things I think that sealed the fate, besides the drafting the two guys, Ford's in the last year of his deal. And because he played enough, they have what's called an escalator bonus or something, where his salary was going to be $3.5 million this year.
Okay.
So the Browns went to him a week or two ago and they restructured it. They did that with Harrison Bryant. They've done it before when a guy hits a high escalator and said, look, none of that's guaranteed. And they came back and gave him like 1 or 1.5 million guaranteed.
Okay.
And so that kind of says, we were going to cut you at 3.5 million, but if you take the guaranteed 1.5 or whatever it is, okay, you're going to get that. So he did that. Okay. Well, that kind of means that's your spot for Nick Chubb. Now, whether Nick Chubb had an offer and did not take it, or his agent said, let's wait a little, see, or whatever, I don't have any inside information on that. But I think if he'd have taken the offer, I'm assuming that was out there for him before the draft, because I don't think the Browns expected to take Sampson and Judkins. I think they might have expected to sign an undrafted guy like they did, but not the money type of a draft position. So yeah, I think Sampson, he can catch the ball. I don't know if he'll come out of the gate as ahead of Ford, but I think that he end up, because I'm not too sure they would re-sign Ford, at this point after, he might be available and they might bring him back, but he's got some skills, but he's had his chance for 2 years and really hasn't been the bell cow.
Okay. And then in round 3 with their first pick, even though David Njoku was still considered one of the more dangerous tight ends in the game, they went after Harold Fannin Jr., who had a really unreal season out of Bowling Green. Might turn out to be the most popular Bowling Green performer of all time after the year he had, getting the 3rd round pick. So speaking about not having that extra receiver in the draft, even though that's true, and that could be something to talk about depending on whether they add someone or not. And you talked about Deontay Johnson. That's kind of what Harold Fannin is now. He's a guy who could probably work out of the slot and give you, because he's not that much of an in-line blocker guy. So that's going to give him both David Njoku and Harold Fannin Jr. going to be on the field quite a bit.
Well, yeah, Njoku is really like a wide receiver, but he has become one of the best blockers on the team. Early in his career, he wanted to, he demanded to be traded, and he didn't want to. Well, then he embraced being a blocker, putting his head down, got the contract, and now he's one of their best blockers and one of their best threats. Problem is, he had some injuries last year, and they really had nothing behind him. Jordan Akins, who was still unsigned, was like all they had. You have the names there. Most of those guys were undrafted type free agents. And that's really, you had all your chips on Njoku. And when he was out, you really didn't have much there. And they're going back to that run first philosophy with 2 tight ends, sometimes 3 tight ends. And you didn't really even have a legitimate second tight end. So that's where I think Fannin can really, they can spread him out, but they can also teach him a little bit, in blocking. But you do have to use somebody else maybe in the short yardage blocking. But I think they're going to run more 2 tight ends. Kevin Stefanski ran a lot of 12, 13 personnel, 2 or 3 tight ends, in his first 4 years, first 5, before last year. And so I think that's part of it. Plus, Njoku's only like 28 or 29, but he's like now in his 9th year. They got him when he was 20. And I think, Fannin's, again, young, and they think that he can develop as well. But I think ever since they let Harrison Bryant go, they haven't really had a legitimate short yardage, second blocking tight end, or even a pass receiving. So I think Fannin and Njoku, one or the other, can also split out and be used as a wide receiver as well.
All right. Now we're going to talk about the last 2 picks. This has garnered a lot of the attention, and we get it, deservedly so. And that is, first of all, going after Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round, and also taking him ahead of Shedeur Sanders, and then being able to come back in round 5 and still you see Shedeur Sanders. So really a lot to unpack here. I want to start off, first of all, with Gabriel. So when we were talking about Gabriel on our last shows and our pre-draft discussions, it was more of, hey, you know what? The kid's got he's got a lot of experience, big time football, had a breakout year, almost kind of reminded you of like Brock Purdy, that he's got a lot of experience and he's probably going to get drafted in the 5th or 6th round because of his size, but keep an eye on him. He's somebody that could be a nice little sleeper like Brock Purdy. I'm not sure we ever imagined that he was going to go as early as round 3. So how surprised were you that they, first of all, picked Gabriel in round 3 and then picked Gabriel at all over another quarterback?
I was pretty surprised because draft night, the talk with Tommy Rees, former about Alabama offensive coordinator, and his connection with Jalen Milroe. We know they liked Milroe. I knew they liked Will Howard. I knew they liked Sanders. We just didn't know how much they liked him. I never really heard Gabriel. He kind of went under the radar. When they had those quarterbacks in town for private workouts, just about all of them were mentioned, but Gabriel. I don't know if they just, if nobody was seeking it out, but I really didn't hear his name mentioned. In fact, I went to the combine. I interviewed or sat in on almost all their interviews, but Gabriel was kind of an afterthought. I didn't even video him or wasn't in his get together for the reasons you mentioned, size and so forth. But after the draft process, Andrew Berry said he's kind of a guy we had slated or pegged that if he was there at the end of the 3rd round, that's where we were looking to take him. And so they took him at 94, which, was that the trade or who they got in the trade for Amari Cooper. So basically when they traded Amari Cooper, they got Dillon Gabriel out of it. So yeah, I had heard that night and talking to some of the sources I was talking to when he said, okay, if Sanders and Milroe are still there, are the Browns going to take one of them 2? And they said, I don't know about that, but keep an eye on Will Howard. Well, they didn't take any of them. No. They took Dillon Gabriel. So I will say this, in talking to him and watching him for 2 days, he has a strong arm, and his ball was very impressive coming out, very tight spiral compared to what I saw from Shedeur Sanders. He looked like he had a stronger arm. And you know what he reminded me more of? You said Brock Purdy. What he reminded me more of, Russell Wilson, a left-handed Russell Wilson. When he came out, I don't remember the fanfare of Russell Wilson when he came out. I think he was a 3rd-round pick of the Seahawks. I don't remember if he was supposed to get drafted higher or lower or what, but I know he had transferred from like North Carolina State to Wisconsin and got drafted in the 3rd round. He's very stout, good arm. I think if he was 6'2", 6'3", he might have been the first quarterback taken. Obviously, that's a big if.
Yeah.
But I had been around Johnny Manziel. I had been around Baker Mayfield. I don't like the smaller quarterback just because, of what goes along with that. But obviously, he's found a way around that. I mean, Oregon's, being the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year. Who knows?
Yep.
So I was pretty impressed with what I saw, and I think for a third-round pick, there's not a lot of, you're not going to say, oh my gosh, you took that guy with the second pick of the draft,
Yes,
and
exactly.
he's a bust.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's long-term and ends up being a backup even, I don't know if that's a bad thing, but I think he seems to have a lot of intangibles, obviously to play at Oklahoma and Oregon and Central Florida. You got to do something right. And to set the records he did. We'll see, how he holds up.
Well, it helps to have all of that experience, no question about it. And it's funny, too, because that's another thing we talked a lot about was that, all right, we can see Cam Ward, and he deserves to be maybe the top quarterback of the class. But we kept saying, telling you watch, there's going to be 3 or 4 other quarterbacks. I think Howard is one of them. Even Gabriel could have been another, that we just thought that when it's all said and done, that they were going to end up better quarterbacks than Shedeur Sanders. But we didn't expect Shedeur Sanders not to go in the first round or in the top 5, which was a lot of the speculation. Instead, the Browns are able to get him in the 5th round. So when did you start getting word yourself that this was also going to be a possibility? Not until the pick, because it's very rare, of course, to take 2 quarterbacks in one draft class, especially the way the Browns now have 5 quarterbacks, even though Watson's never going to play for them. 4 is even a lot. The way the NFL rosters are set nowadays. So yeah, how surprising were you when the Sanders pick was made?
Well, I was surprised a little bit just because there wasn't much on the radar of that. I mean, there was so much. There was talk up until a week or 2 before the draft. A lot of the even local media, national media, were convinced they were still going to take him. And if they didn't take him at 2, they would trade up into the first round if they could to take him, or for sure take him with the first pick in the second round if he was still there. I don't know how to evaluate this, Greg. It's eyes in the beauty of the beholder. I was pretty impressed with him when he met with us on Saturday and talked for the first time along with Gabriel. He said, I don't know, why. He was asked why he's so popular. He says, I really don't know, why. And he asked the question back, why do you guys think I am? He's very likable. And he said, 99% of the hate comes because of his dad. People just don't like his dad.
Yeah.
And I found him as very engaging. After he was drafted, he immediately showed up in Cleveland. He was showing up at local high schools, and working out with local high school football teams in the inner city. And it was like, he said, I don't do that for show. I do that wherever college, so I haven't really followed him much, but I was pretty impressed. He stayed on the field the first 2 days that I was there, about 20 minutes, 30 minutes after practice, throwing with some tryout players, working on throwing. I thought he looked pretty good to me. He looked different than Gabriel. The first day, I thought Gabriel looked a lot better. Second day, I thought they were about the same. He throws some pretty good balls. I know he attracts attention. The first video I put out of him, the last I looked, had over 500,000 views. And it was just him, taking a handoff to a running back. I had 2 videos that had over 1 million views on X. And, obviously I've been through this with Johnny Manziel and Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham. And, I don't know how it'll play out, but Andrew Berry said that it came down to value. And this is the point I want to make, is that they look at players as assets. And I think particularly quarterbacks, because it's a quarterback driven league. And when it came down that at the 144th pick, he was still on the board, they clearly had him evaluated as much higher than a 5th round pick.
Sure.
And a lot of people said that Jimmy Haslam, the owner, made that pick. I think this is what he said. Haslam let us do our job. They went to him. I believe this is what happened. Something to the point, Mr. Haslam, he is more we have this as a really good value right now to trade for. But do you want us? Do you want the? I don't know if headache's the word, but maybe the attention.
Yeah.
I don't think it was so much him wanted to make the pick. It was more like, hey, you want to veto this because we won't go there if you don't want this.
Okay.
And obviously they traded 2 of their late picks to move up and drafted Sanders. So I clearly think they had Gabriel rated higher, at the end of the 3rd round, but they took him about in the middle of the 5th round. So whether they had him a little lower in the 3rd round or higher in the 4th round or whatever, but when he was there in the 5th round, they felt like there's an asset. If both Gabriel and Sanders play well in the preseason and everybody's raving about them, or a year from now somebody loses a quarterback,
sure,
and they're not sold long-term that they're the long-term answer, you can trade one of them for a draft pick and recoup, what you tried there. Or I could very well see Sanders and Gabriel kind of being the long-term 1-2 or 2-3, on this team if they really like them, because they're under that rookie contract. So, that's kind of where it is.
All right. So, and that makes a lot of sense that if we're looking at 4 quarterbacks, and of course Watson's got to be there. What is your best guess on how you think it's going to shake out with the final roster, with the veterans? I mean, is Kenny Pickett potentially the odd man out now?
Well, that's a good question. They're not going to have 4 quarterbacks on the active rosters. Watson's going to be on PUP. But of these 4, the strange one was the Joe Flacco, that they made that move a couple weeks before the draft. I thought they would wait and see how the draft went. I think if they started right now, Kenny Pickett would be the starting quarterback. Okay. Unless Gabriel and Sanders really take off, one of them takes it. Because, Greg, the first move they made, we talked about the whole offseason of getting the quarterback. And what did they do? They went out and went after Kenny Pickett. They didn't just say, well, we'll take him. Yeah. I thought when they traded DTR to the Eagles for Pickett that you're just exchanging 3rd-string quarterbacks, or maybe, he'd be competing for the 2nd. I'm not saying this in disrespect, but when he interviewed with us on Zoom, he said, well, they told me I'm expecting to compete for the starting job. We're like, yeah, right. Because he played for the Steelers, and a lot of the people that covered kind of felt like as long as Pickett's the starting quarterback of the Steelers, Browns are in great shape, and then obviously they moved on from him. So I think, though, I think they see him as a guy that fits into Kevin Stefanski's offense and can do a lot better. He had the Matt Canada kind of a debacle when he was over there,
Yep.
And so we'll see. But I go back, they sought Pickett out. They went to the Eagles to seek out that trade.
Okay.
I know Andrew Berry really liked him coming out of the draft. He said so a couple times. So he was a 1st-round pick. They gave up a 5th-round pick in DTR, and he wasn't going to be, they thought they were going to play an offense more suited to Deshaun Watson and DTR, and they're clearly going back to a different style, which I think Pickett. I mean, Joe Flacco's 40 years old. He's not the future. You could make an argument he could be the settlement with the 2 rookies, or you could say, well, we'll move on from Joe. And I don't think they would keep both, or they would trade or cut one of the rookies. Andrew Berry's never cut one of his draft picks the year that he's drafted them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I'm pretty sure that the difference is the value. Pickett's guaranteed $2.6 million. Flacco's like $3 million. If the Saints come calling, would you trade? Would they want Flacco or would they want Pickett? Last year, they brought in Tyler Huntley, and everybody wondered, why in the world did you bring in him with DTR, Jameis Winston, and Deshaun Watson. And they kept 4 quarterbacks on the final cut, trying to trade Winston or Huntley, and they couldn't get any offers. And they ended up then hunting or cutting Huntley a day or two and he went on the Dolphins or something. So I could see them trying to trade one right up until, after the cuts, but see if a team loses a guy. But it depends on what Gabriel and Sanders do. If they go into the season and say, we're going with Gabriel as our starter from the get-go, or we're going with Sanders from the get-go. Everybody said the most ready to play in the NFL was Sanders. He could be the number 2 pick. So who knows?
Yeah.
Regardless of what they thought about him. But maybe Kenny Pickett will win the job, and then Joe Flacco will be the odd man out. So
yes,
I don't know, but they're not going to keep 4. But we'll see. Pickett's younger, $2.6 million is an easy to trade. If somebody says, yeah, we like what we saw, we'll take him. But the Browns might say, no, we're going to keep him, because then we got 3 quarterbacks. And depending on what happens this year, we'll go from there.
Well, it's a nice problem to have. I don't think there's any question about it. Like you said, especially at that quarterback position, everybody's looking for quarterbacks. So Browns have 4 of them, and we'll see if any of them can win the job. And take the job. And I'm sure they're going to give them as much time as possible to do that. Taking a look at, because we already talked about a couple of free players that were signed after the draft, UDFAs. Were there any UDFAs that they paid a lot for, or that stuck out to you from what you saw that you think has a leg up on the rest, or you haven't just seen that yet?
Undrafted.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just reading a statement the Browns just put out on JOK. He's being placed on reserve, PUP, physically unable to perform, and I hadn't read the whole thing.
Okay.
That kind of he wouldn't count against the roster, so I don't know what all happens here. But anyway, Donovan McMillan, I heard some talk about him. He's expecting a safety because of the reason I said the safeties were they hadn't really brought in anybody. Like I heard they brought in a couple of veterans today, but just because of the sheer numbers. They had Hickman and Delpit, but 3 of their top 5 safeties are not with them this year. McLeod retired. Thornhill was cut, salary cap reasons, and Anthony Bell went to the Seahawks as a free agent. So they really only had Hickman and Delpit, and Trey Dean, who was on the practice squad, Chris Edmonds. So Donovan McMillan kind of stuck out as a possibility. There was other than that, I didn't hear a lot other than the guy we talked about from Tulane, Huntington.
Yeah.
So
I don't really, none of these guys really stick out to me either. Like I said, the only ones that did were the 2 guys we talked about, Huntington and Mascarenas Arnold. Those are the only 2 that kind of made an impact for me. I think this Lardane kid, I think he's the kid from Miami of Ohio, I believe.
I'm not sure. I don't know too much about him, but I didn't really hear a whole lot.
Oh, South Carolina. Okay. Maybe he was transferred there. Okay. Yeah. He had, it is what it is. But look, again, this is the thing about the Browns. Berry and the staff have done a really good job with the roster. Once they figure out that quarterback spot, they're going to be a dangerous football team. So before I let you go, Fred, can you give me like some sort of a grade on the off season for the Browns, as far as, because when we talked about it and we went in, we talked about needs like quarterback, edge, receiver, defensive tackle, safety, running back, tight end. And it looks like they have taken care of most of that. Of course, we talked about whether or not they have the adequate depth at edge, whether or not they have that depth at receiver, and also at safety. So there are some still questions, but how did you think they went overall as far as the offseason?
Yeah, Yeah. It's early because you don't know what you're going to get out of Gabriel, and Sanders can make a big difference if you find your quarterback. But I'd say B plus, right now because of a lot of the things. So that's kind of how I'd wrap it up. But
Okay.
that's about it.
All right. And I know with this news coming out with JOK, including the safety, since we've been on the air, you've got a lot to take care of here. So, Fred, I'm going to let you go. I appreciate your time as always. And I look forward to talking to you right around training camp time, unless a big story erupts between now and then. So, again, thank you very much for your time.
All right. Appreciate it.
You got it. Take care, Fred. That's Fred Greetham, Orange and Brown Report. We're going to have links in the description so you can check out how to find Fred and his work at the Orange and Brown Report. You can also check out links in the description to purchase this. Matter of fact, let me pop this off the screen. This is the draft review guide that is going to be available at Our Lads in about a month. So you can check this out and you can, I think, see this as early as, I believe, June 27th, somewhere like the third week of June is when these puppies are coming out. And interviews like this help me a great deal with getting the opportunity to put in the content for every team. We do reports on all 32 of the teams. We talk about what we believe the teams, how they did in the draft. So I have the Browns and 9 other teams. So that's really what this is all about, the draft review guide. So this is just solely an opportunity to dig into all 32 teams. We grade the drafts. We talk about the players and the impact with the team. We try to find as much information out, like with these questions, like I have here, the Q&A sessions from insiders like Fred. Also checking out OTAs, rookie minicamp, what's going on there. So we try to do our best and then put it all together here for you, including, as I said, a grade, as well as the free agency, how we believe that they did as far as the key impact players in free agency, and also notable undrafted rookies that are signed following the draft. So when I talk about the Browns, I think we just talked about them. I probably will add just 2 players unless something happens. We still have a few weeks to go before, I think, almost a month before I have to put in my final draft for the Browns and for all the other teams. So hopefully we'll hear something between now and then. But right now it looks like the Browns are not really in need as much for the rookies as far as the ones that were taken and signed after the draft. Which is a good thing. That's what you want. You don't want your team. You don't want to go deep diving into college free agents, the ones that are signed after the draft. Because if you need a bunch of those, you're probably not in a good position. I think every team, as long as again they've hit well in scouting, I think every team should have at least one that makes the team. Because there's just so much talent out there following the draft. But then again, you're going to have maybe a handful of these guys that are going to stick on as far as the practice squad is concerned. And then, of course, you're also going to go deep diving all over the NFL and find out which players that weren't with you in camp, but were outside of other camps. They're not going to make those teams. So, hey, let's bring one of those guys in either for your practice squad or maybe they make your 53-man. So that is it for our Cleveland Browns coverage. Once again, check out the links in the description for everything covering the Browns with Fred Greetham, as well as the draft review guide, how to get that out on Our Lads. We're going to also let you know how to hook up with all the videos and everything else over at Our Lads. And we'll see how this goes. I mean, I think we're going to have a lot of fun with it here on Proline TV, getting the opportunity to interview some of our really cool insiders, the guys that have been helping us out for years now, including Fred, to find out what's going on with all these teams. But we're also going to continue to pop up the videos on the Our Lads YouTube channel. And there, matter of fact, Hayden Russell, one of the scouts over at Our Lads, is going to help me to break down each of 2 classes this week. Because keep this in mind, this is one of 4 interviews I'm having this week with all 4 AFC North teams. So we had Fred today. We're going to have John Sheeran tomorrow. Alex Kozora, who covers Pittsburgh Steelers, will be on Friday, I believe. And Tony Lombardi, covering the Baltimore Ravens, will be with me on Thursday. So we're covering all four. I mean, once I got the first two, I was like, oh, I got to get the other two. So I did. So I don't think I'm going to be very lucky that we can keep doing all four teams on any given week. But we were lucky enough to do it this week. So we're going to have all four AFC North interviews. And then Hayden, as I was mentioning, is going to break down each draft class for the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. So, matter of fact, if you're watching this at this point in time, this video, you probably already know it's available over at ourlads.com right now. Or maybe you'll have to wait a couple of days, but check that out. And as soon as they're available, we'll put links in the description so you can find that out over at ourlads.com. Later in the week, John Cooper, lead scout for our lads, is going to help me to break down the classes for the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that is going to be on Friday. So we're going to record Cincinnati Bengals here on Proline TV on Tuesday, the Baltimore Ravens on Thursday, the Pittsburgh Steelers on Friday. I'm going to hope to hook up with Hayden regarding the Browns and the Bengals classes on Tuesday, and then we're going to post them accordingly. And then John Cooper will be my special guest on Friday. And then we're going to take care of both of those classes and then edit them in with some parts of our show here because these interviews obviously last sometimes an hour, depends on who the guest is. And so we'll take some nice snippets from the interviews, edit them with the interviews with the Ourlad scouts, place them at ourlads.com. And again, you're also going to get the full interviews here over on Proline TV. So that is going to wrap it up. Also, don't forget at this point in time, you can check out our NBA coverage, our Major League Baseball coverage with Jim Feist and Indy Isco. We'll have PGA Championship coverage. Of course, that's a big major on Thursday in North Carolina. So Jared Smola is going to join me live tonight on Proline TV on Monday night live. It's about 8:30 start. So we're going to preview the PGA Championship. Then we're going to talk a little F1 and NASCAR tomorrow, I believe, with CJ Redoon, RotorWire.com. We're also going to preview the Preakness Stakes on Wednesday. I don't know if we have a time set for that, but I believe it's going to be at 7 o'clock on Wednesday night. That's I think we're going to probably put that together for sure, maybe tonight, and then post that. So you can have a couple of days in advance notice, but I'm thinking it's probably 7 o'clock Wednesday night, a live Preakness Stakes edition of our horse racing coverage that comes out every week with John Hardoon from the Ragas and Sheets. And then the rest of our coverage the rest of the week, including baseball and the NBA playoffs. So I believe that is it. I think I've said it all. Thanks for tuning in here to this Proline TV report on the Cleveland Browns. Thanks to Fred Greetham. I'm Greg DePalma. We'll see you next time.